Michael, is it true what they say about Pore?
I don't know, Ian. What do they say about Porfill?
That it's a pore filler who blames pore filling on pore filler?
That is true. Yes.
Okay. Well, with
Uh,
that, Michael Bashkin, you want to tell us how to avoid pore filling?
I will do my best.
All right, thank you.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I hope thanks for tuning in today. And I'm going to run through a couple different pore filling scenarios for you this morning. I've got some guitars ready to go in the spray booth, so this is actual demo on my work going through the shop and not just scrap boards. Except for one new product that I wanted to show you. So I'm going to go over three different types of pore filling. One is an
Not
epoxy pore
necessarily a
fill,
small shop. So it ends
and
up to be a rolling pedestal.
Yeah. Okay.
So I make a rolling pedestal, but it's a little bit longer.
so one is an epoxy pore fill that I like to use on my bodies, not my body, my guitar bodies, and I'll go into the reasons why. And then I'll be using a paste pore filler on mahogany neck, and I'll be showing you that. And then finally, there's a new product that I came across recently that my friend Mario Beauregard introduced to me. It's made by a company called Chill Epoxy. And I'm not exactly sure what this is, whether it's like an epoxy or polyurethane, but it definitely shows some promise. It's might be a little bit more of a wood filler, but I think it has applications in pore filling as well. And it's got some really cool properties, which I think would actually um, make it useful both in building and repair. So I'll show you that
Michael,
one last.
Michael,
Yeah.
really quick, wood filler versus pore filler. Maybe it's I'm having. Is that like wood replacement, like almost like a putty? Would you say a wood filler is, or what distinguishes
Yeah,
it?
I think the wood fillers generally have are more of a putty consistency, have a much thicker viscosity. So,
Cool.
but beyond that, I'm not sure there's any difference. Maybe um, there's some difference in terms of plasticizers and um, amounts of poly things in them. So if anybody else knows, then please chime in, and also please feel free to ask questions at any time during the demo here. So
Absolutely. Okay, I'm gonna
okay,
mute myself again.
all right. So I wanted to I'll start with the my body fill. I use this silver tip epoxy. Jeff Jewett turned me on to this. For years, if not decades, I used the West Systems epoxy, and it was actually only probably the last 5 year or a couple years that I switched over to this 207 hardener as opposed to the regular hardener, which I think might be 206, 205.
205. Yeah, that's
Okay,
the special clear.
this is the special clear, and um, it's not so much the clarity that I'm after, but the fact that this is formulated to not have any amine blush, I think is a real plus. Just to remove that as a possibility off the table. The amine blush is some byproduct of the epoxy curing, and it can give you a little bit of a milky white haze, something which you really don't want to find out after the fact. It's easy enough to get rid of. It's water soluble, so you can just wipe it off with a damp rag, but I just prefer not to have to think about that or deal with it at all in the first place. So if you do like to use West Systems, then I do recommend going to the 207. The Silvertip Systems 3 is also has no amine blush in it. So they're both fine on that account. Um, I prefer the silver tip to the West Systems. This just seems to sit in the pores a little bit better. I can't quite quantify why, but that's one of the reasons that I like to use it. And then probably the best thing I like about it is that it's recoatable without sanding within 3 hours and up to 72 hours. And My whole methodology about doing the pore filling on the body is it's all predicated on the notion that I fucking hate sanding epoxy. So I don't want to do any sand. I want to do as little sanding as possible. So the method that I put this on the guitar body is a way where I have to do pretty much no sanding, and then I'm able to recoat, every 3 hours or every day, etc. So I can get all my coats on, and then it's just really the last one that I'll do a scuff sand. And if I have any ridges or anything like that, I'll typically take those off with a scraper rather than sanding. Um, so that's another thing that I really like about this particular epoxy. And again, thanks to Jeff for turning me on to this. So, all right. Any questions so far?
Jeff, anything else to add about that? I'd like to get
Well,
Jeff in.
yeah, I just want to make just a couple comments about that the silver tip product. Keep in mind that the silver tip product is not an epoxy adhesive. That's not what it was manufactured for. It's a laminating resin. And what that means, it's used much like fiberglass resin is. So it has a very, very high, what is we call in the chemical world, a very high glass transition temperature, meaning it's just hard as nuts. I mean, if you let a little bit of that stuff dry in the bottom of a cup, it's water clear and very, very hard. So I really like it. And as Michael says, it does seem to penetrate a little bit better. It probably is because of its viscosity, but it's more of if it's manufacturing. It just really flows into the pores. So as such, it's a good stabilizing treatment for if you have really squirrely woods like a really like wild grain rosewood, or something with knots or something like that. It's a really good way to stabilize those woods. So I'll turn it back to you guys.
Cool.
Good stuff.
Wood stabilization. That's cool.
Yep. All right. Um, okay. Well, I'm going to start doing the demo. Just one more comment before I get going.
Should I spotlight overhead, or do you want two spotlights?
Sure. So this is
Oh
the
wow.
body. This is the body I'm going to be pore filling. And the reason that I like to use an epoxy clear pore filler, it all has to do with these purfling lines. And these are the,
Yep.
about the 10 or 11 thousandths lines. And these are, I believe, made of linden. And, they just, every time I've tried to use an oil paste filler, I always remind myself never to use it again in conjunction with these lines because they just, if any of the colored paste filler gets in these lines, then it's just almost impossible to get it out. So I switched to going to a clear pore filler specifically because of the binding, the perfing lines, just to keep everything like really, clean and crispy and neat looking. Worked fairly hard to get to this point. I don't want to dump a bunch of color in the lines and make them not look nice. So that's another reason why I prefer the clear pore filler on the body, um, and feel like it's advantageous to use it there. So okay, so I'm going to measure out the epoxy.
Michael, can I pop in really quick and ask you about where you're prepped to? So that looks like a oily rosewood.
Yeah.
Are you prepped in such a way that you feel like you need to promote mechanical adhesion to start off with, or is this like normal, like sanded like out to 220 orbital or something like that?
Um, I well, I think it's normal. I don't know. I'll just tell you how I do it, and you can tell me if it's normal or not. But yeah, I power sand, meaning that I'm using air sanders or electric sanders or random orbits with 220, and then I'll typically follow it up with 320 by hand with the grain, and I do that, all on all surfaces of the guitar. On the neck, I have to be a little bit more careful. Uh, there's some thing when we do the pore filling on the neck, there's some trouble spots that I typically have on my necks that I'll point out. And because we're using a colored pore filler on the necks, if you do have any sanding scratches, the pore filler can actually get into the sanding scratches and highlight them.
Yeah.
The clear pore filler is a little bit more forgiving, but there's there are definitely worse things. But I'm being a little bit hyperbolic here, but there's nothing worse than getting into your finishing process and then seeing
Something cross grain.
some pigtails or something that you needed to get out, and it's buried pretty deep. So what I do is, after I hand sand with 320 in the direction of the grain, I will wipe the guitar down. I'll blow it off with compressed air, and then I'll put on my optivisor, and then I'll wipe the guitar down with either a mineral spirits or naphtha, and I'll really rotate it under some bright lights. And I find that without using the wetting agent of the naphtha or the mineral spirits, that it will show up scratches that I might have missed otherwise if the wood was just dry. The other thing that the mineral spirits or the naphtha does is it will remove any oils or anything that really shouldn't be on the guitar. And and also, unless you trust your compressed air to be oil free, it's always good to give it a wipe afterwards, because there's a good chance there's some oil particulate
Yeah.
in your compressed air lines, unless you have a filter. I have one on my spray booths, but just for blowing off the guitars, I don't have the best filter for that. So another reason. I also find that even blowing it off with compressed air at say 125 psi, I'm always amazed at how much dust I can still get off the guitar. Uh, so with the naphtha and these blue shop towels, which I go through an incredible amount of, I'll wipe some of the guitar down, and I'll still pick up some color on the towel. And then even after that, I like to take these blue towels just dry, and I find that they have just kind of the right amount of texture that when I wipe the bare wood, I'll still pick up a little bit of color on this. And as we're putting the epoxy on, you'll see it'll be picking up some color. I think some of that is from the solvents in the epoxy itself, but I really kind of want to reduce that as much as possible. With the worst case scenario being that everything I just told you about, how I want to keep the purfling lines, really white and clean. I don't want to be wiping in this colored epoxy, all over the guitar. So on the wood portion, it'd be fine, but on the purfling lines, which is really, what I'm trying to preserve, I want to keep things clear. So, does that answer your question about the wood prep?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Let me get my little product placement in here.
Just one quick question, Michael.
Yes.
Is this something that I can call NAFTA? Just because here in France it's quite difficult for me to find NAFTA, and I'm using this one. It's okay. It's lighter fluid.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's very similar. The lighter fluid might have one additional chemical in there. And actually, naphtha is now illegal in Colorado as well. Whether you think this is a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not sure, but I live close enough to Wyoming, which is a state where pretty much anything goes. So I can go up there and I can buy my fireworks and naphtha, practically in the same store. So I do try and take precautions. I'll wear a respirator and certainly gloves when I'm handling naphtha, and I'll freely admit to you that I was not so careful in my earlier days. So I try and be careful about it now. So yeah, but I do think that it's helpful, and I would say even necessary to be able to degrease or wipe down the guitar, right before you start applying the finish.
Are
So
are all the petroleum distillates in that kind of bracket? Are they all getting the same treatment? Like, is it impossible to get mineral spirits as well, or?
I don't think mineral spirits is under the same category. Jeff could, I'm sure, speak on this more than I can in terms of what's in there. But as Jeff told me, anything with a an ene like toluene, xylene, um, etc.
Naphthalene.
is toluene, is it's probably still legal, but if you can avoid it, it's probably worthwhile. But I haven't quite given up on my affection for naphtha yet.
Mm-hmm.
Charcoal lighter is the same stuff.
Charcoal lighter fluid.
Yep.
Okay, good to know.
But that's been outlawed too in many states. But no, there's 3 naphthas that are sold. They're all slightly different, but charcoal lighter is really close to it.
Okay, I'll show you the. I'm just going to go grab the naphtha I use. I'll show you.
What about like wax wash or something like that from Mohawk? Is that stuff any good, Jeff?
Yeah, that's fine. Again, what makes naphtha preferable to a lot of other solvents is in the refining of petroleum, hierarchy, as you will. The further you get away, or the higher the distillation or cracking point they call it, the farther you, or the higher you get away from the petroleum product, the less oily it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes clear. It becomes less oily when you feel it. But the big benefit is that it dries faster and it doesn't leave a residue, like any sort of an oily residue that like mineral spirits does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the naphtha that I use. It's specifically the varnish and paint naphtha, and it's got the lovely name Sunnyside, which makes it seem a little more innocuous.
Makes it seem darn right almost potable, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You want to have a drink
Yeah,
of something?
sure, put a little in my coffee, but anyway, I can still get it in these large quantities. So, and as Jeff said, I do prefer it for wiping down the guitar over mineral spirits. I find that mineral spirits just it takes a lot longer to flash off. Um, so, um, and one other thing with naphtha that I use both in repairs and building, I find that if I wipe the guitar down really good and almost build up like a liquid layer on the surface, not only does it help me see any sanding scratches that I might have missed, but it's so thin, the viscosity is so low that if there are any checks or anomalies in the wood, it'll run into that. And then
Wicked, yeah.
as it evaporates off everywhere on the surface, you might see a line where it's still dark from the naphtha because it's penetrated down into the wood. And I've definitely caught a couple, hairline cracks in a backside set doing it this way. And uh, and then chase it with a little super glue and just keep checking it until I'm not seeing the naphtha go down in there anymore. So it's a nice check as well. And if you're looking for a crack in a top, maybe not because it's separated, say due to some kind of pressure, so it's closed, but it's there. Then spreading naphtha on the area and watching it evaporate can help you locate that crack. So, all right. So I use these little epoxy mixing cups. Actually, Ian turned me onto these, and I feel terrible about contributing to the plastic waste, but they're pretty invaluable. This is an Amazon purchase, and I do like using them. So, all right. So I'm going to mix this, and you can mix it either by volume or by weight. I mix it by weight, and the volume. If you want to mix it by volume, it is a 2-to-1 ratio, and then the weight is different. It's 43 parts hardener to 100 parts resin, and I've got a couple little ratios just written on the box that I typically use. And I like to mix pretty small amounts, which is why I like to do it by weight. It can be hard to measure out very small amounts by volume and get it correct. So I do have a scale here with 2 decimal points. And again, because of the small volumes that I'm using, uh, I think it's good to have a 2 decimal point scale. I like to mix with these coffee stirrers, and you can see that one end I've just chopped off flat. Reason being is that when I mix it, then I can get down in the corners as opposed to, running this radiused corner in there. So, all right. So my ratio is 1.29 grams of the hardener to 3 grams of the resin. And I tried to keep this foil on the top and then poke little holes in it, so I can just very slowly dribble this into the cup here.
Michael, are you using the ratio from the company, or have you made your own ratios?
I'm using the ratio from the company. Now, I suspect because they say you can just mix it 2-to-1, I don't know that it is hypercritical, to get this exactly at 1.29 grams. If it was 1.3 or 1.28 or 1.27, I suspect you're going to be just fine. Okay, so I'm at 1.3, so I'm going to call it good and stop there. And then for the resin, I don't like to pour it right out of here. It's just a little bit too hard to hit 3 grams, so I'll pour some off in a cup, and then I'll pour out of this cup. Okay, so I'll zero it out, and now I'm going to put in 3 grams.
Do you always do it in that order, Michael? Hardener first and then resin?
Yes, and I'm trying to think of a good reason why I do it in that order, but I don't have one.
I always do it the other way, and I also don't have a good reason.
Okay, well, you're from the southern hemisphere, so that makes sense to me.
Ooh. You gonna take that line down, Bo?
I always do. I like Australian jokes.
What's your open time in that mix?
You are an Australian joke.
Oh, wow.
All right.
I
2.99.
thought this was a friendly group.
Yeah.
One other thing I should mention is that I've will wear a respirator when I do this, except for today for audio quality purposes. But it says no VOCs on this, but I don't quite believe it. But anyway, I'm shortening my lifespan for you guys, so I hope you really appreciate it. So you can see it's totally clear, and Now I'm going to start mixing. And
By the way, Michael, the reduced life comes off the end, so I don't think you need to worry about it that much.
that's true. You know, I have a friend of mine. He's a lifelong smoker, and he's like, you know what? Those last 5 years, you can have them. I don't want them. So
So,
Certainly not if you smoked your entire life, I'd imagine.
yeah.
is the Pore in a 4.3 grams all up? Is that just for the back or back end sides of a guitar?
This should do the back and sides.
Whoa. I find that
Uh,
surprising. Anybody else find that surprising? That looks
yeah.
like such a small amount.
Now, I could be wrong, but well,
Well,
yeah,
still, even if it's close, I mean, you know how much
I
like
might prove myself wrong here. But
how
one of the
much
things
oil?
that I want to emphasize here is that I'm really trying to put as little epoxy on as possible, which is why I use a razor blade. And I don't want it to build up on the surface because then I have to sand it. And the whole thing is, I don't want to sand this, or I want to sand it as little as possible. So there's just not a lot of, and I've tried it both ways, you know, because this stuff shrinks back. I find that I need to do this a couple times. And so I thought, well, if I just goop it on and then let it cure and then sand it back flat, I'll be done. But the sanding it back flat was so unpleasant that I don't like doing it that way.
Have you tried gooping it on then scraping it back?
The scraper is definitely nice, but anything with gooping it on is I found to be it feels
Michael,
good at the time. It's like in terms of the short game, it's a great idea, but in terms of the long game, I always resent doing it. Yeah.
is the sanding part of it the just kind of the mess involved, or are you actually? I would think you would be worried about like opening up new pores that then have to be filled again, like if you were doing too much sanding.
It's more just the mess involved and the
Yeah.
fact that even fully cured epoxy will still gum up sandpaper,
Mm-hmm.
and so I just find it really unpleasant. All right, so I kind of started spacing out and was doing way more mixing than necessary for that small amount. So I would say if you mix this for 30 seconds to a minute, you'll be just fine. Okay, couple tricks about the razor blade is, sorry,
Yep,
I'll
there
use
you
this
go.
camera. You can see that I nicked off the corners here. I rounded them off. That is it's definitely something you want to do. And then I've got a piece of 1500, sorry, I don't know if this is going to focus, 1500 just wet dry sandpaper. And I'm going to take the razor blade and I'm just going to run it back and forth and just rotate it a little bit this way as I'm going back and forth. I'm just trying to take off any burr and just sort of smooth out this part of the blade a little bit. I don't need it to be sharp enough to shave with. I just need it to be sharp enough to pore fill with. And I find that I get a smoother application if I do this. So, all right. So let's get the guitar in the holder here. And just give me a second. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is put on some gloves because this is actually part of the process. And I can't say I've found a difference necessarily in razor blades, but I do use these smart razor blades. I'll take all the help I can get. Okay, so I'm gonna put a little epoxy on here, and the thing is I can always add more epoxy. I'd rather be working with too little than too much. And I'm going to, at least first, I'm going to stay away from the edges. I'm just going to kind of spread this out.
I forget, Michael. Did you say is this your move for all woods, or is this just for kind of rosewood stuff? Would you use this on mahogany?
Yeah, right now this is my move for all woods because I typically do the same type of purfling schemes on all my guitars. But there are alternatives. Like, for example, I could do this treatment, really seal up the guitar and all the purfling lines, and then switch to a paste pour filler if I wanted that look in mahogany. And I do prefer the dark pour fill in mahogany.
Yeah.
So, all right. So the reason that I'm staying away from the edges right now is because the edges are kind of where the problems are. And you can see even where I've, was careful cleaning off the guitar, I'm picking up a little bit of color, but it's really not much. And I'm spreading it so thin.
Michael, wouldn't starting on the white purfling be smarter because the epoxy hasn't yet taken the color of the rosewood?
Well, there's reasons that I'm kind of avoiding, laying it on the white purfling. The amount of color that I'm picking up here is it's so minimal in terms of like when I'm actually going over a white line. I can't tell you, exactly how much epoxy is on there, but it's not enough to show this color. Okay, so once I've kind of wetted down the back like this, one thing that I'll do is, you can see I really don't have any big, globs or runs on here. I have a few areas where it's thicker. So I can take this epoxy and wipe it off in a different cup and get rid of some of that color. So we can do that. And see what that looks like. All right, and now I want to take what I have on the guitar, and I'm going to start at the very edge and really scrape this back. I'm going to work my way across the guitar from one end to the other.
Anybody else finding this incredibly soothing?
Okay.
It's ASMR. You can use it to go to sleep tonight, Ian.
I was just gonna say there's nothing more relaxing than watching somebody else work.
So you can see I've picked up some more color. So I'll wipe that off in another cup. Um, and this is all still the same initial little, blob of epoxy. And at the end here, we'll weigh the epoxy I have left, and then you'll see how much we can actually know how much is actually on the guitar and why I'm not concerned about, that somehow I'm dampening the tone of the guitar or the plates or anything. Okay, so that's the back, and you can see I have a very small bead along the edge here, and
Yes.
that's something that I am going to take care of. Um, so don't judge me yet, because again, I'm the whole thing with this method is I don't want to leave any big ridges or have to come back and sand any epoxy. And I want to leave it so that in 3 hours, I can come in and everything is smooth and I can do the same thing. And if I have all these little epoxy ridges or bumps, then I'm not going to be able to apply it, smoothly in the same fashion. Um, so right now, what I'll do is I'm just going to take my finger, my gloved finger, and I'm just going to smooth out that the bead along the edge. And it's a very small amount we're dealing with, but if it does harden, it will cause me a problem in the next application. So I'm smushing it out flat right now. Okay, so that's how I do the back. Um, and I'm going to switch to the sides now. There is a little bit of urgency because this stuff starts to kick off. And it becomes more viscous, and it doesn't, get into the pores or quite wet the surface as just quite as nice. Um, and I don't know if you can see it, but I'm using the Total Vice here, which I found is really nice. For doing this, especially for the sides, because I can tilt the whole guitar. Okay. All right. A little bit of epoxy there. And basically the same process at the back. I have a decorative end graph on this, which also has a lot of fine lines, which is another reason that I want to use the clear pore fill. There's a couple spots in this particular set of Brazilian that, there's a knot or two, and they were a little punky, so I'll saturate them with thin CA glue, and then I'll come back with shellac stick and fill those. I don't. If I have a void, I don't really like filling it with epoxy as much. Uh, I feel like eventually, the epoxy shows a little bit more. I'm not sure if it's ultimately from shrinkage or it's just the wood moving underneath. But I found shellac stick to be very stable. So
Michael, Joe wants to know if it starts to kick too soon, have you tried adding heat via hairdryer?
That's a good question. No, I'll just mix up some more. Some builders I know like to actually heat up the wood with a
Uh-huh.
hair dryer before they put the epoxy on, or as they're putting it on. And the idea is that will reduce the viscosity temporarily of the epoxy, and it'll flow into the pores or any
Yeah.
anomalies in the wood better. I think that's there's definitely something to that method. It's just not something I've tried myself. I
Joe,
can't
it's
say that I've
also
found it necessary. Um, and because this is an exothermic reaction, and if the wood is hot, then it's going to kick off the epoxy a little bit faster. So
yeah.
you can see I'm doing a lot of spreading, and it might make the spreading a little bit more difficult. So all right, so I've got this wetted, and now I'm going to do final pass where I'm going to be methodical, and I'm going to run across the guitar this way, building up a bead and taking off any excess. The final bead is going to be, sorry about the camera focus here, is going to be on this edge, and then I'll wipe it down with my glove to smush it out. I'm not really sure how I can get the camera to focus any better.
I think we're stuck with it on Zoom, unfortunately.
Okay.
You're on a phone, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if it's just focus lock. Giuliano's figured out how to hook a DSLR up to Zoom though, so maybe we'll get fancy one day.
Giuliano's above my pay grade. Giuliano, I just got your book. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Nice.
Look at Giuliano's image here. Like, it's just stunning. Look at this. Got shallow depth of field. His tools are blurred in the background. Oh my
It's a
God.
subject, of course.
The subject is, yeah, absolutely.
It's so nice. Yeah, of course.
Sorry, let's get back to sorry about that, Michael. I
No, that's all right.
got distracted with how handsome Giuliano was.
We can all appreciate Giuliano's beautiful presentation. So something I haven't showed you, I'll show you right now, is it's a little bit stupid to do this. No, it's very stupid to do this way. But I don't have anything on the top. I'm not gonna epoxy the top. I don't have any sealer on the top or anything. It's just bare wood at this point. It's just a little bit of I just kind of got used to working this way, but you don't want to get any epoxy on the top. It'll actually, if you have like a little spot on the top, it'll create a little bit of a different look in the finish. So you want to keep the epoxy off the top, or make sure the top is sealed. Okay, so you can see this is the bare wood top. I've done pore filling of the rosette, basically in the same. I can't get it to focus in the same manner, but I just use like a very small stick, and I kind of push the epoxy around the rosette. So, and this is the end graft that I have on this guitar that is not going to come into focus. So,
Michael, can you just take a paper towel and just rub your lens really quick and just make sure that it isn't having a hard time with dust on the lens?
Sure. Okay.
Even by.
Now I found for rubbing the lens, I only use these Scott blue paper towels.
Is that right?
Yeah. All right.
You heard it here first. Accept no substitute.
Does that look any better?
No, but that's all right. What gen is your phone? Is this a modern phone or?
It's an iPhone 12 mini.
Oh, okay.
Which fine. I was told is the worst selling iPhone ever.
Uh-huh.
And And I said, perfect, I'll take it. Because I,
It is just not focusing on anything.
yeah,
Oh well, we'll get the picture.
all right.
Maybe if you change from the cinematic mode to the normal, because I believe it's blurring the background.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, you might have a yeah. I think that's right. I think you have blurred background on.
Okay, let's see. Whoop. All right. So let's see. So if I don't know, man. It says none.
Basically, if you keep swiping right, oh, it says none.
It says none.
Okay, then it is what it is. But it does look like it's trying to create weird depth of field stuff.
Okay.
Actually,
I could
hold
try the
on.
camera on the backside.
Actually, can you hold the screen up to the other your laptop thing? Oh, go ahead and turn it on so I can see what you got there. Sorry.
That's right. Oh shit.
We might be
Is this
flying too.
Ian's guitar repair and IT service?
That's right. You're gonna want to turn it off and turn it back on again.
Yeah, somehow I lost the
Zoom call.
I lost the Zoom call, so
go ahead and do the swipe and close out of Zoom, and maybe when you re-engage it'll
right.
come in with a better thing. By the way, the laptop camera is working great. If you can gerrymander that into position to show off, then we'd be fine.
I could try it. Let me just
yeah, let's try the zoom on the phone one more time, just
okay.
for fun. And somebody want to provide us with a musical interlude while we're doing this? Bo, would you like to sing?
I come from a land down under.
You do. Truth in advertising.
Giuliano, I just got your book too the other day. Looking forward to reading it.
Great.
To say anything about Vegemite sandwiches?
Some of us signed on a little bit late here. I get confused about time zones. Not to bug Michael, but what kind of epoxy is being used here?
It's this System 3 silver tip, and I won't repeat everything I said earlier, but
no, for sure.
But I go through all the reasons why I like this one, and to give credit where credit's due, Jeff Jewett recommended this to me, and I owe him one for this. So
cool.
Okay, so I gotta get back to pore filling here because I don't want this to kick off too much. And I'll be done here in just a minute, and then we can move on to the neck.
Michael, you only wipe it down with the razor blade. You don't wipe it down with anything else afterwards?
No, that would, I believe that would be counterproductive. I've tried wiping it down with one of those little foam paint brushes to try and smooth things out, but there's so little epoxy on here that it really doesn't do it. I just haven't found there to be any benefit of it.
My experience too, it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much like to pull it back out of the pores, like with any kind of like adhesing.
Exactly.
I know Ken Parker likes to do it with some shop towel. Well, they're paper towels, but industrial paper towels. That's what he uses, at least in his video.
But he uses a product called Kim Wipes, made by Kimberly Clark. And Kim Wipes are absolutely lint-free.
But he's also not, he's not doing a pore fill though. He's doing it as a sealer. So it's not 100% about filling the pores.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a critical point. If I want something hard and rigid to scrape off the surface and push it down into the pores, if I were to kind of wipe it, with anything that's compliant enough to kind of conform down into a pore will also pull the epoxy out.
Which would defeat the purpose, and you'd have to do it a lot more times.
Yes. Now, this being said, on a very deep poured guitar like this rosewood, I'll end up doing this, I'd say a minimum of 3 times, a maximum of 5. It may seem like overkill, but at least for the way that I finish, any time that I put in spending now before I lay down my first coat of lacquer is time saved later. Not having filled pores by the time you start shooting lacquer is just going to be more time intensive later. So, okay, so same thing on the sides here. There's a very small little bead that's built up on the edge of the binding. I'm just going to smush that down. So there's no ridges to sand or anything that, when I come in a couple hours from now and do the second coat is going to prevent me from having another very smooth application like the one I'm having. All right, I'm going to tilt this in the total vise a little bit more. So now I've kind of got my cutaway in this orientation and put a little epoxy on there. And
You typically do 3 coats a day, like if you start early. Michael?
you could do 3 coats a day. Typically, I do 2 because I don't work that hard or that long. Don't tell anybody I said that.
So essentially, what you're saying is you're printing money with guitar building.
Yes. I'm just amazed at how lucrative this career is.
You heard it here first,
can't believe
people.
why
If you
more
want to print
people
money, get into
won't do
guitar
it.
building.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, I didn't hear at the beginning. Are you using their slow hardener or their fast hardener?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I did not mention it. I am using the fast hardener. I've not tried the slow hardener. I don't think that would be any advantage unless your shop was at a really high temperature, which might be the future for everyone.
Man, the focus on that camera is really crazy.
It's t-shirts if you focus on.
Okay, maybe I should.
No, it's okay.
I won't do this to you guys, but I was saying maybe I could. I'll take my shirt off and I'll put it on the guitar, and then the focus will be good. So, all right. So that's the first pore fill on the body. There's one little section of the neck here, or excuse me, the body. It's completely covered by the neck, but just in terms of consistency, I'll just seal this up, and I could just take my finger and kind of smush it around there. All right, and then just as a last double check, I'm going to run my finger around all the edges, smush down that little bead that you get from pushing the epoxy across the guitar. And that's...
Hey, Michael, it looks like you're using the front-facing camera on your phone. Is that true?
Yes.
Oh, that
it's
might be
probably
part of
better
it.
if you use the rear-facing camera. That could be the problem.
Do you know how to do that? I'll show you really
right.
quick. Hold on one
if somebody
second.
wants to talk me through it, and I take no responsibility.
No, it's actually good call on that, Eb. Can you see me, Michael? Let me see here. Let me,
Yeah, I can see it.
There should be a little thing of arrows. They look like little circles
Yeah.
facing each other, and that's what it's like, a little flip.
Yeah, so like on the camera, let's see here. On the, where is it here?
I
There
got
it
it.
is.
Right here. Yeah.
And
All
the
right.
other thing you can do once you put it back in, if you click
Perfect.
the screen where you're wanting to focus, it should focus on that section too. But that looks
Oh,
better already.
look how much better that is.
Yeah.
All right. This is why I need
Uptown Funk.
a full-time IT support
Good call on
for
that.
my
Who
business.
did that? Who shouted that out?
David.
That
Nice
was
work.
David. Thank you, David. Okay. So when we started, we had 4.29 grams of epoxy. Oh, I'm going to move the camera over here. We had 4.29 grams of epoxy, and we'll see if we can figure out just how much epoxy we put on the guitar. So I'm going to weigh 2 cups, and let's just say for our purposes that the variance between cups is going to be low enough. All right, if somebody has a calculator, the empty cups weigh 2.18 grams. And this is all the epoxy I didn't use. And we have 4.55 grams. So minus 4.55 minus 2.18. What do we got?
2.37.
Okay, 2.37. That's how much grams of epoxy is left. And we started with 4.29 minus the whatever the number you just told me was. So it should be like, I don't know, two something grams. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
Okay. So on this entire guitar, back sides, deep poured wood, I have a little over 2 grams of epoxy.
And
in terms of, changing the acoustics of the guitar or worrying about that, then I think those concerns are pretty minimal. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Giuliano will tell you that, this will probably change the frequency response curve, maybe a hertz or two. I'm not sure in which direction, but let's say it stiffened up the back a hair and it added a little mass. So maybe those two factors counteract each other. But I haven't found that when I take my frequency response curve measurements before I apply the pore fill, I don't find that the pore fill shifts it in any undesirable way. So.
Cool.
Michael, have you ever done epoxy on the top just as a rub kind of sealer, French polish sort of type thing?
I probably have, but if I did, it was so long ago, I've forgotten about it. I do seal the top, and I use the Cardinal two part sealer, and I use the method that Ian showed me, where basically I don't spray it on, I just French polish it on. And again, I find that I'm really applying very, very little. So I doubt you can see it. Let me see if I can get this to focus.
So can we talk about the?
But it's what I wanted to show you is that I can see that I've definitely done some pore filling, but this one application is not where I want to be. I definitely am going to be, doing some more applications, and I typically will overdo it. I'll probably go at least 3, or up to 5 coats of doing this. And there's one last critical step. I'm going to hang this up now. Okay, so I don't know if you want to put me back on the laptop
Sure.
there, Ian.
Sure.
So there's two ways to think about the last coat and what you do afterwards. And there's a couple ways to think about it. One is that I will hard block sand it, and I find that it's so thin on the surface that it's pretty easy to go through in a spot, and that'll cause a color shift once you start finishing. So you have two choices there. One um, way of thinking about it is actually I want to sand off all the epoxy off the surface, just leave it in the pores, seal the guitar, and start finishing. I think that's a totally valid method. The issue with that is doing too much sanding and opening up some potential pores. You might also be exposing your purfling lines again, possibly. What I will do for the last coat, if I do sand through anywhere, is I'll mix up the epoxy just like shown, and then I'll take some acetone or Everclear, and I'll thin out the epoxy by about 10 to 15%, really reduce the viscosity. And then rather than razor blading it on, I'll just wear a glove and I'll just wipe it on, super thin coat. And basically that is just evening out the color. That's what it's doing. At that point, there's a couple different ways about thinking about this. Is that some of the solvents in the epoxy are some of the same solvents in lacquer. So if I let that last finger applied coat of thinned epoxy sit, if I can spray my first coat of lacquer within 24 hours, it'll actually chemically bite into the epoxy. No sanding required, no scuff sanding. I just spray it right on, and that's so far I haven't had any problems. That's worked fine for me. If I had,
can I interject and say that just actually scares the crap out of me?
okay, well, I want to make you feel a little uncomfortable.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
but I'm gonna take your word that works. That's awesome.
The other way of thinking about it is that no, I want the epoxy to fully cure. Let it go 2 or 3 days, and then scuff it with a maroon pad, rough up the surface, and actually count on some mechanical adhesion for your first coats of finish into the pour fill. So, okay, wow, this is it's taking a little bit longer than I thought, but lots of good questions.
I'm let's see, we're at an hour, right?
Yeah.
Did you think it was going to be half hour or 45 minutes or something, or?
Oh, I don't know.
I think it's good. Do we want to open it up to questions, or do you want to? I got a couple questions.
I've got a couple more things that I really would like to show.
Okay.
So yeah, because the process that I use for the neck is totally different.
Yep.
So I'd like to do that now.
Okay, no more questions, everybody.
Yeah, but while I get prepped for that, if anybody has questions, go ahead.
You ever mess around with throwing shellac over the top of the epoxy?
I have not. I have heard kind of anecdotally that something about the adhesion between shellac and cardinal lacquer can cause some problems that I don't remember quite what it is that the lacquer likes the shellac more than it likes the wood.
Well, Cardinal just came straight out and said that they don't want people using shellac with their lacquer, I believe.
Oh, okay.
I think that there was some misuse that led to that.
Gotcha.
Led to that diagnosis, but.
All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a traditional paste pour fill on a mahogany neck, and I've used different paste pour fillers over the years. They've become really hard to get. I really liked the this stuff out of Canada. I can't remember the name of it. LMI used to sell it. It's not the microbead pore filler, um, but if anybody knows, but they don't sell it anymore. So, and I've tried to get it through other methods, but anyway, no luck. So thankfully, I'm going to say thanks to Jeff Jewett again. He supplied me almost with a lifetime supply of paste pore filler. I like this Bartley stuff. And then I think this was a Sherwin-Williams product that
That's
he,
correct. Yes.
yeah, he gifted me. And so I like using these on necks, and a couple reasons. One is that the method of application I just showed you with the razor blade would not work well on a neck with the curved surface. And you could use just a finger glove method and kind of smush it on the neck. But again, my premise here is I don't want to sand epoxy, and I have some things on my necks. I'll just show you. Like this little volute area with the, it's hard to get the epoxy in there cleanly without, building up a nice ridge somewhere. So um, but probably the biggest thing is I just like the look of a dark pore filler on a mahogany neck and a mahogany body. So this neck has been prepped essentially the same way. The difference is that I already did a epoxy pore fill on the face of the headstock, and that is to protect all these veneers. I could come in with a colored pore filler at this point, but I am just going to keep pore filling this with the epoxy. So I'm not going to put the paste pore filler on this portion of the neck. So I'll just stick to the mahogany, and it's been sealed with the Cardinal two-part poly something sealer. So I can show the part numbers for that if anybody would like to know.
Sealed by spraying?
No, actually, sealed by wiping.
Okay.
So common sense would tell you to spray it, but I became so enamored with your wiping on the sealer technique that I tried it on a neck.
Okay.
And it works fine. Um, the thing I like about it is I don't have to clean my spray gun. I don't have to get in the spray booth. It's all very quick and easy if I could just apply it by hand, and it seems to work fine.
Cool.
So,
Michael, do you spray that? Be dumb question, but do you spray that seal on the body, or do you wipe it the urethane sealer on the body over?
I just wipe it on. I don't spray it. I have sprayed it before, and it works fine. I just feel like labor-wise, I haven't found any compelling reason to spray it as opposed to wiping it, which is faster and less cleaning. So.
And Chemcraft, was that the pore filler you were talking about?
That's the one, Chemcraft. Yeah.
Got one jar left.
Okay. All right. Well, become friends with Jeff. Maybe he'll give you some of his last can. Okay, so neck is prepped. It's sealed, sanded. When I was talking about looking for sanding scratches, I actually don't do a lot of power sanding on the neck. It's mostly hand sanding, and I find the areas that are most problematic are right in here, in these areas where it's switching into the end grain along the heel transition. Some of these areas can be a little bit sneaky. This joins completely flat with the cutaway on my guitar. So I'm usually have to sand this kind of lightly because I don't want to change the dimensions of it. So I'm very careful to look for sanding scratches here. And then of course, in and around the volute, this is a hard area to sand. So I inspect those carefully with naphtha with the Optivisor on, because as I mentioned earlier, when you're putting the dark pore fill on, if you have any sanding scratches, the pore filler will just treat that as a pore and actually give you a dark line in a sanding scratch. So it's not a very forgiving process. Okay.
True dat. Who's playing guitar? Who is that?
All right, Ian, I think we can switch to the other camera.
All right. Can I give a little bit of credit for the wiped on sealer? Should
Sure.
So that's actually something I picked up from Jason Barrowman. We did it
Okay.
with the vinyl wash coat at Breedlove, and it did a couple things. One of the things I noticed about sprayed on sealer is it always raised the grain just a little bit, and it seemed like the wiped on, in addition to not raising the grain, actually compressed the grain and gave like just like a little bit more chatoyance to the wood. It seemed like, and then it also like any little fur or any like that stuff could just almost kind of get burnished down in during the wiping process. So it wound up cutting down on a lot of like first spray leveling. But
yeah.
Ian, I think you mentioned that just because you've been waiting to say chatoyance all day.
Chatoyance.
All right.
Chatoyance. All right.
So this is the paste pore filler. Give it a little stir. And I don't add any color to this. I find that I actually really like it on mahogany, just the way it is. But you can certainly make it darker if you'd like. If I have a super dark Indian rosewood, say headstock that I'm trying to fill, or Brazilian, and I was using the paste pore filler, I would probably go darker than this, really edging towards black. All right.
Is that a oil based?
Yes. So others on the call will know more about this stuff than I will, but I think it's like linseed oil and some kind of a colorant and then some kind of filler compound, either something akin to pumice or drywall ground up.
Silica.
So, okay.
It's a mineral called nepheline cyanide.
All right. There we go. So I basically, I just kind of French polish this on. I'll put a little bit on the neck here, and then I'm just going to wipe it on with the blue paper towel.
Oh, that looks nice.
Like so.
And do you find chocolate pudding works as well, or would you mostly stick to Porfill?
The one time I tried the chocolate pudding, I ended up on my my shop sofa with chocolate pudding all over my face, and I was kind of passed out. I'm not quite sure what happened. So
yeah.
Now with the end grain right in here, I'm going to wipe up into the end grain, really push it into the pores, like so. And for those of you if you haven't done this before, you want to apply it liberally, leave it on the surface, and then after it kind of flashes off, you'll come back and wipe it off the surface. So, this isn't the final product that I'm after here.
Sorry, Michael, I may have missed it. Is that raw mahogany that you're putting on?
No, this is sealed.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, can I jump in on this real quick?
Yeah, of course.
he's applying it with a paper towel, and a paper towel is absorbent, right? So there's a little bit of finesse to this, because if you're wiping it with the paper towel aggressively and kind of like a wiping action, you'll just pull the material right back out of the pores. So there's a little bit of finesse to be had in application here, and he's put it, like, it's going on pretty rough there, and pretty heavy, because he's trying not to, like, wipe it right back out of the pores. So I'm guessing, am I putting words in your mouth, or is that?
Oh,
That sound
that's
right?
exactly what I'm doing, Ian. And thank you for using the words finesse.
He's a finesseful fella, this Mr. Bashkin.
So, but for the most part, what Ian's getting after here is I'm not overworking it into the pores. I'm just kind of giving it a wipe across the pores, once or twice, not a lot of pressure, and just allowing it to get down in the pores. Now, on the end grain, I'll kind of work it in just a little bit more, because there's a lot of very small open pores, and I want to make sure it gets down in there.
If your goal at the end of your proceedings with finish is to have a flat finish, this is mission critical right here. Unless you like spending a lot of time filling pits with CA or something.
Yeah, and I will do this. I will do this twice. I find that this first pour fill will get most of it, but to avoid more finish work later in terms of having to go back and touch up things with CA or whatever, that to me it's worth it to do a second pour fill application. But I let this stuff dry at least overnight. I think it's oxygen that actually completes the reaction here. So if you can see it, it's starting to get kind of a satin hazy finish here, where this still has some shine in it. And once it hazes over, I can come back in and start to wipe it off the surface.
Yeah, back just a little bit. There you go.
Yeah. So that's kind of what you want it to look like, at least after the first pour fill. I don't know that the second pour fill really looks any different, but I've just found it to be worth the time. The other thing is that after the second pour fill, I will scuff sand it with maroon Scotch-Brite and then wipe it down with naphtha. You really don't want any of this on the surface. It'll look terrible, and for some reason that probably Ian can explain, it may not look terrible for a while until after the guitar is completed. But you cannot leave a film of this stuff on the surface of the guitar.
Yeah, it will. It will. Well, I mean, you're putting, so whatever the particulate is in there is probably the same particulate that Jeff turned me on to using for diffusing. Maybe, Jeff, is that right? But it'll be pretty diffuse looking if you leave a big chunk of pore filler on there.
Well, the bulking agent, as it's called in pastewood filler, is not transparent. It's sort of semi-transparent. The stuff I turned you on to was using pumice.
Pumice, yeah.
And when that's bound in with linseed oil or true oil, that becomes very transparent.
Mm-hmm.
There's an opaqueness to this stuff. It actually, the bulking agent in pastewood filler is a mineral, natural mineral. It's called nepheline cyanite for you tech geeks. And it's basically just ground up rock.
Jeff, can I pick your brain about some hypotenuses I've had about pore filler? Do certain manufacturers use dye as a colorant and others use pigment as a colorant?
No, they should. No, they should not. And the reason for that is because in an oil base, dyes are very mobile. For lack of a better term, it's a very unscientific term, but they stay very mobile. And what they'll do, and actually this was the case with Gibson for many, many years, the color from the paste wood filler will migrate up into the lacquer.
Yeah.
And that was responsible for that kind of classic kind of look on some of the SGs, I think it was. Dan could probably, elaborate on that a little bit better. But that's definitely not something well, the technical term for that is bad.
Yeah.
Very general sense.
But if we're trying to replicate, for the guys working on vintage guitars, if we're trying to replicate bad, we should probably
oh God, who's the guy that does the relic finishes? Murphy. Murphy gave me, actually Dan has the names of them somewhere. There's 2 Lockwood oil soluble dyes that you can use. I think one is like kind of a cherry red, and they're powders, but they're oil soluble. In other words, they dissolve in the matrix of the paste wood filler. And I don't recall the names of them, but Dan has it somewhere in his records.
Just so you know, I messed around and TransTint does seem to go beautifully into some homemade pore filler that I messed around with.
Yeah, it works. It works to enough of a degree that it stays put, for lack of a better term.
The one thing that I did kind of like about having the dye as the colorant is that it did seem to impart to the sealer coat just a little bit of an extra color. It seemed like it after you wiped it off, there was just a little more color over the entire project than just.
Was your sealer coat that Cardinal 2-part product?
No, the sealer coat that I would have used would have been just straight shellac, but.
Well, that's because the TransTint actually burned in a little bit to the shellac.
To the shellac, yeah.
Yep. Burnt, well, for lack of a better term, it ate into it a little bit.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a really good looking neck, Michael.
Yeah, it is.
And that's just like it actually may make me want to go back and start using some paste wood filler. Oh, wait, I sent all my paste wood filler to you.
See, here's.
So I don't have any more, Michael.
Well, if you want some of it back, we can talk about it.
Has anybody successfully used any of that water-based pore filler that, like, I saw Stu Matt, like the Timbermate stuff or anything like that? Like, I could never get that stuff to look good.
Yeah, I've heard so many bad things about it, especially in end grain. I never tried it. Oh,
it's absolutely awful on end grain. Anything water-based on end grain is just going to make it go black. Yeah.
I have used this, and this is water-based. I found, with the 2-part poly sealer from Cardinal that I didn't have any problems, and I thought this worked, just as well as the oil-based pore filler. So for whatever that's worth. Okay, so if you've noticed, this should be hard to wipe off. The traditional cloth for wiping this off is actually burlap, and it has a little bit more, tooth to it than the blue paper towel. But this, this should be kind of like gummy. You should have to press a bit to get this off. If you wait too long, it's not the end of the world. You can take a little naphtha, and at this stage that'll actually quickly dissolve and loosen up any hard spots. And actually, after I scuff this with the maroon Scotch Brite. I will wipe it down with naphtha, just to make sure that again there's really nothing on the surface.
That's after 24 hours of cure, or
Yeah, or overnight.
yeah,
I don't know if you can be able to see this, but you can see all the
beautiful.
thousands of little pores here on the end grain. I don't want to put any naphtha on it, but once there's finish on this, it's going to be really, I think, really beautiful. Probably one of the most, pretty parts of the neck is having all this end grain with pore filler in it. So, this is what it looks like at this stage, and I'll repeat this again. The back of the headstock is Brazilian, as is the face. So I'm just going to fill those with epoxy. There's no white lines that I want to protect here, so I could have easily done it with the paste pore filler as well. So, all right. So that's how I do the necks. Any questions, thoughts, concerns?
Yeah, being that that's oil-based, how long will you wait to put anything over that, and what's your next step?
That's a good question.
Yeah, good question. So I'll wait a minimum of overnight, and then I will either do another pore fill or say it's after my second pore fill. Then you can go ahead and spray sealer or whatever you want to start your finishing process from here on out. I typically, after the pore fill, I'll always do another coat of sealer because of what Jeff was talking about, the migration of some of the color up into the lacquer. So, and then the sealer also adds another little layer of bulk to the pores. This stuff does shrink back a bit, and so I can still get a flat poreless finish. But if you look at the guitar, say a couple months or a couple years down the road, I expect to see a little bit of sinking into the pores. So, and the overnight is a minimum. If you can wait a full 24 or 48 hours, there might be a small benefit. Um, so if you're not in a rush, then you can give it some extra time,
Michael,
especially if you have a really deep pore filled, a deep wood with a lot of deep pores in it. So, and then just for comparison, this is a neck from the same exact billet. So these two are the same, and you can see how much we've changed the look of the mahogany using the paste pour fill.
got some contrast going there.
Yeah. So,
Michael, can we go back to the next step? So it's my understanding that the pore filler, the oil-based pore filler, is not like if you were to spray lacquer over it at this point, the only adhesion that you're really going to get is mechanical. Are you doing anything mechanical to get ready for lacquer or sealer, or what's your next move?
yeah, just the maroon Scotch Brite.
Okay.
I'll grab a piece of that so people know what I'm talking about.
But if you were to take this and it looks really great, and you're like, hey, I got an idea. Why don't I just spray lacquer over this as it is?
Uh-huh.
Your lacquer,
Yeah, actually,
your lacquer
that's
probably have some adhesion issues, but
maybe. Yeah, there's some reasons to think that you could skip the second sealer coat, but I've erred on the side of caution and always put a second sealer coat on. But again, I'll just wipe it on. I won't break out the spray gun or anything like that. So.
And your second sealer coat is the Cardinal again?
It's the Cardinal, and I will again. I'll scuff that sealer coat with this stuff.
before your first spray of lacquer.
Yeah, before my first spray.
Awesome.
Exactly. And the according to the spec sheet on that Cardinal sealer, I think you can. It's 2 hours or 3 hours. You can actually recoat. Um, I think it's the kind of thing where, again, it's not fully chemically cured. And if you do scuff and then spray right away, you might get a little bit of a chemical tooth from your first coat of lacquer into your last coat of sealer as well. But I haven't had any problems, waiting overnight, scuffing, and then spraying lacquer the next day. So,
Cool.
all right. I'm ready to move on to the next thing, unless anybody has any more questions about the neck.
I had one, Michael. I might have missed this. Why did you not use epoxy on this? You just like this product more? Does epoxy give you particular problems on the neck?
Yeah. So the main reason is that I like the way the dark pore filler looks.
Okay.
So, kind of a definitely more traditional look, highlights the grain. And then I found, unlike the body, because I have all these curved surfaces on the neck, you either have to like do a process of, kind of applying the epoxy like this. And it's just really harder to get totally flat and smooth. I've not tried the Kim wipes. Maybe that would do it. But again, I'm doing everything I can to avoid sanding epoxy.
Sure.
So the nice thing about this, pore filler is it's really more of a kind of an additive process rather than an additive and then subtractive process. I don't have to take anything off the surface other than just scuff sanding it and making sure there's no sealer on the surface. So I find it's just less, there's a few less things to think about than with the epoxy.
Okay. Thank you.
Michael, if you were doing mahogany back and sides, would you pore fill the same as the neck, or?
I think what I would do would be to apply one coat of epoxy pore fill over the whole body, which is not going to give me a complete pore fill, but will seal all the perfing lines.
Yeah.
And then come in with the colored pore filler and do it that way.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure who told me this, but somebody who uses vinyl sealer, they'll use an airbrush, like seal the whole guitar and then come back in with an airbrush and just put several extra coats of vinyl sealer on all the perfing lines and then come in with a dark colored filler.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another way to do it, but it's not a technique that I've tried myself.
Sounds fancy.
Okay. All right. So the last thing that I wanted to demo up for you, I'll just do it right here in front of the laptop.
You ready for a camera switch?
Sure.
Let's see, where is that camera?
Is this stuff? It's P-Tech 8400. So gotta love the fancy name. And Mario Beauregard showed me this stuff recently, and I think it's got some potentially interesting applications. I've yet to actually try it on a guitar, and I'm still kind of playing around with it. So this is the stage that I'm at. But I prepped a couple little mahogany boards here. They are sealed with the Cardinal 2-part sealer, and so we're basically dealing with something similar to the necks. And I'd say let's try applying it with a razor blade. I'm just going to go safe the edges real quick.
Michael, what is this stuff? A different type of epoxy?
It's a very good question. I wish I had an answer for you. The company mostly makes epoxy, so, but I'm not exactly sure what, I'm not
Let me look
exactly
it up.
sure what this is. So, um, okay, so huge differences about this stuff is it only has a working time of 3 minutes.
Ooh.
So, and it dries to sandability in 20 minutes. So you're not going to be able to, slowly work it into the grain. You're basically going to have to work at a small area at a time. Might be why this might be a little bit more repair friendly than, say, building friendly.
It's a urethane. It's
Oh,
basically a
okay.
urethane.
All right. Um, it has zero VOCs, and I'm not really detecting any smell to it at all. It mixes as a 1-to-1 ratio, either by volume or by weight. And, the only caveat I could see on the technical data sheets from the company were that I think it's the part A that humidity will kick this off.
Yes.
So, you want to keep it covered and, if possible, in a low humidity environment. So, the first thing they say to do is to knead the pouches. And this comes in several colors, including cognac, and this is a French Canadian company, so I thought that was particularly appropriate. But this is the dark walnut color. And I'm not going to weigh this out. I'll just mix it by eye here. And that's what we're looking at.
Ooh.
Now, Mario told me that the one of the colors they offer is black, but the black to his eye under finish looks a little gray. So he recommends taking something like this and coloring it. This is the part B, and again, I'm just going to sort of eyeball a similar amount here.
Is that also like kind of? It looks like the consistency of what is that? They're both similar consistency.
I'd say the part B is a little bit thicker.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it says just to mix to an even color. And on the technical data sheet, it says that you can build up a thickness of this up to 30 millimeters. So if you if you have that kind of need and you're building and repair, that guitar probably has bigger problems. But
It does come in clear, Michael.
oh, it does. Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit, and I'm just going to put it over here for the time being. And all right, so we've got this, and you only have 3 minutes to work with this stuff. So
Wow, that
definitely
really
want
is
to,
just filling the pores, isn't it?
yeah,
That goes in nice.
it does go in nice. Um, and because of the quick kickoff, I don't think that you'd want to leave yourself too any on the surface if possible. But just for sort of demonstration technique, let's try a little bit of a different application and see if we can kind of French polish it in. So that seemed to work just as well, maybe better, actually. And then wipe across the grain off the surface. And So you can color this stuff. I've got some white, I've got some black. So let's try adding a few different colors to it and see what we get here. This is the Glue Boost powdered stuff. I suspect other things will work just fine. I'm only using this because this is just what I have in the shop. So here we have a very black pore fill. I could try a little bit of the white. Okay, so yeah, it's made it a little lighter. So I think the color is fairly adjustable, and if Jeff said, as Jeff said, if it comes in clear, then I think the full color palette is available to you. And then we can compare these in a minute here. Okay, so that's the black, and I definitely am leaving some color on the surface. So either it's starting to kick off, or I just mixed in too much powder, or it wasn't well mixed. Okay. Now, another thing about these, I haven't tried it, but I've been told, like, say you're spraying and you're into your finishing schedule, and then you notice that you have a pore that didn't filled, or you put a little ding in the guitar as you were moving it around, that it's fine to use this stuff between lacquer layers. So you can do a fill with this and then just keep spraying lacquer over it. It says no shrinkage, and with the fast cure time, it seems like this could save you from having to really delay your finishing schedule. So I'll see if I can.
Hold on.
Sure.
Interesting. So that is so. I must have missed it. Did you seal this wood first?
I did. I sealed it with the Cardinal 2-part.
So it does seem like it's imparting a little bit of color to the seal coat. Like it's definitely, like, parts that are not poured do seem to be darkened a bit.
Yes, I would agree. It looks a little bit worse on camera than it does to my eye.
Oh well, I actually like that effect. I like there being the ability to add color to the wood.
Okay. And yeah, it's interesting you say that, because the 2-part polyurethane sealer from Cardinal is, I would suspect, is pretty inert. Like, I don't think this stuff is chemically biting into it, so it might just be a thin film on top.
Thin film, yeah.
That's kind of filling in. So, and then yeah, so this stuff is definitely starting to kick off a little bit, and we'll come back to this and just see how hard it gets with a fingernail test over the next couple minutes. But it says it's sandable after 20 minutes, which is could be a time saver, could be something property to really take advantage of, either in building or repair.
Yeah.
So again, this is a company called Chill Epoxy. and I had no problem ordering it from Canada. Came right away. So
How did you find out about this stuff? Was this just kicking around the?
I actually had to go to Japan to find out about it from a Canadian builder, if that
Ah,
makes any sense.
seems circuitous, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's kind of top secret stuff. So,
Oh, okay.
no, when I was in Japan at the Osaka Guitar Show, uh, my friend Mario Beauregard was there, and he bought this stuff. And I think the company that makes it is very close to where he lives, so he has some kind of relationship with them. And so he likes the stuff, and he bought a couple pouches for us to kind of fool around with. And yeah, so I ordered some when I got home because I think it's got some potential. From what I can see here, I don't know if this is coming through on the camera, but it looks nice. It could definitely, if I pour filled a mahogany neck with this, I wouldn't have any problems with it visually. And rather than having to wait overnight at a minimum, waiting 20 minutes and keep working means that if needed, you could cut a day or two out of your finishing schedule.
Yeah.
Whether you need or want to do that, um, there's a lot of factors at
Well,
play
I
there.
mean, anything we can do to address the global guitar shortage, I think, is a win. You know.
Yeah, good point. So, yeah, but I think it's also applicable for repairs as well.
Yeah.
Um, I could see it actually as a substitute for if you ever have to bondo anything.
Yeah.
This might work just as well without the obscene smell
Yeah.
coming off bondo.
Yep.
So,
Epoxy putty. It might be better than epoxy putty.
uh, yeah, maybe. Um, I, as someone said earlier, this is they point out this is a polyurethane. So maybe there's uh, some physical advantages to using it over epoxy in certain situations.
Yeah.
Do that.
Oh.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you later.
So what I was going to say is, Ian, if you want to put the laptop camera back up. Okay. So that's the three things that I really wanted to show you today. Quick product placement. Okay.
Are you still getting coffee kickbacks from those guys?
No.
Oh, okay.
But I'm just doing that for the comedic effect. Can't help myself.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
So
do you want to say anything in summation, or?
Yeah. I'd love to take a couple questions because I just want to show you how hard this stuff is getting. So if we could extend this at least for a few more minutes,
Yeah.
that would be good.
Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
I'm just
anybody?
wondering if anyone's tried Super Bond for any of this. It's an epoxy putty-esque material.
I have not. Anybody else?
I just tried it for the first time to glue down fingerboards, which was spectacular because it didn't ooze. It was really nice that way. But I haven't used it on any other purpose yet.
I've never thought of using epoxy putty for an adhesive.
This one is kind of between like a putty and an epoxy. It still has some ooze to it, but the amount of ooze is like I could paint it around the slot for the truss rod and it didn't go sliding in there and gum up everything. You know, I tested it out and it was pretty stable where it was.
Very interesting.
So, David, this isn't applying to you specifically or your situation with Superbond, but I just wanted to share with you that especially when it comes to finishing techniques and trying new techniques, you don't want to be someone else's guinea pig. And that I've definitely used a couple techniques in the past where somebody either thought it was a good idea or told me it worked, and it ended up being a spectacular failure for me. So again, especially with a massive change in either procedure or materials used, you know, test it out first. It's hard. I don't really like testing stuff. I just like to get in and build and try stuff and, convince myself it'll be okay in the long run. But that hasn't always been the case. So especially with new finishes out there, just I would err on the side of caution.
Well, I did find the super bond. I did some testing on wood, and then I had a random test. I had an umbrella for our table outside that the button that allows it to tilt back and forth, the button flew out and the little piece that was in there was dead. So I had taped it up so it would stay straight. I thought, hey, let's use that epoxy putty, shove it in there and keep it straight. And it worked for about a couple days. So it wasn't quite as epoxy-esque as like JB Weld or something like that. I mean, as putty-esque as that.
Right.
But I definitely did some testing, and that was one of the most interesting tests, was trying to force it into a gap and see if it would fill all the space for me. So,
Gotcha.
but yes, I agree. I test on everything before I put it on an actual instrument.
To Michael's point, like, I'm not a particularly superstitious person by nature, but I think just by virtue of not being a chemist and not really understanding much of what I work with, I feel like I have to do some kind of dance to appease the gods even before I start working with finish. So like changing things is very hard for me to do. And as much as it seems like I'm like pretty freewheeling and I do a lot of experimentation and stuff, like I like what Michael said, like very, very hesitant to mess with chemical compatibilities when it comes to things, especially with finish. But
I heard something the other day that I hadn't heard before, but that there are like 2 or 3 manufacturers of epoxy. The actual manufacturers, there are multiple companies with epoxy, but the companies that are actually making the epoxy is down to like 2 or 3 companies total, and they produce for everyone else.
It could be.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts about pore filling? Oh, one thing I'd like to mention, and if somebody has a different experience, I'd love to hear about it. I have tried filling with super glue with various brands and viscosities, and I've never really had any success where it made me want to do it again. And I feel like I've also had some compatibility issues between lacquer and super glues, despite what the manufacturers say. So
was that specifically with Glue Boost stuff, or was this with previous generations of CA?
some of it was this company, I think it was called TP10.
Yeah.
And I found almost no compatibility. With the Glue Boost stuff, I found that the fill and finish was compatible, but the regular Glue Boost, the non-fill and finish products, I felt like had some compatibility issues where they would they were eating into the lacquer, biting into it, and causing me. It was taking more time rather than actually saving any time.
My experience with fill and finish is that the fill and finish thin, when it is a fresh bottle, is super compatible under lacquer, more so than any other CAs. I mean, I would never use CA under lacquer before fill and finish, actually, because it just seems almost like it just rolls right. The lacquer just rolls right off of it. Like no matter how much you abrade it, unless you like really put it on very, very gently, it'll just like kind of, it doesn't really want to stick to it all that well. But the other thing too is it's so hard. Like even if you like really take a long time to buff out and you try to be very mindful about generating heat, you'll still wind up with a dissimilarity from the difference in hardness of the underlying material. So if you got wood and super glue, it's going to sink back into the wood, and it's going to stay up in the CA area. So that's not super fun to deal with.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to fill and finish, it seems like it's both soft enough that it doesn't have that dissimilarity when you're buffing it out, and then it just straight up sticks to it. Like it does seem like if you give it a good abrasion and go over it with lacquer, it does seem to work well. So
I've also used fill and finish with success with some French polish applications, like filling in a little divot to bulk it up and then French polishing over it. And yeah, it's definitely softer. I did take to taking a little micro brush, spraying a little accelerator on the brush, rubbing it in the bottom of the divot, let it flash off for about 30 seconds, then put the fill and finish in, let that sit for 30 seconds, a minute, and then applying a little bit more accelerator and sort of building it up that way.
So I know that Rick was very keen on getting manufacturers to use it as a sealer, and I don't know how that went. It seems like you'd be having a lot of employees with their eyeballs melting out of their heads, but
Yes, very. That's the beginning of the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah,
so.
it like that's kind of like where I come down on that. Is it's like, oh man, it's hard on the eyeballs. But anybody else has it? Somebody, it's my understanding that somebody at one point was doing their entire finishing process by actually dipping the guitar in a barrel of super glue. Does anybody remember that? You ever hear about that? So maybe it was Ovation. That sounds like something Ovation would do.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's great in theory.
I agree with you in theory.
Yeah.
However, in theory, anybody else want to jump in on this while we're waiting for a pour fill to dry?
Michael Greenfield, hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Michael.
It's good to see you. This was super interesting, as always, and not a surprise, but always very welcome. And thank you so much for sharing.
Sure, you're welcome. What are you doing for pour filling? If you were, not to put you on the spot, but just
I'm pretty much doing what you are doing. I'm using actually Chill Epoxy makes epoxies for laminating, for finishing live edge tables and things. And Mario hipped me to that a few years ago. Before that, I was using the West Systems 207. And Mario also told me about this new stuff, but I haven't tried it yet. And he and Michel Pellerin are just like, oh, this is the greatest stuff. So, I'll see how that goes. I'm curious about the clear stuff to see how it is for the same reasons as the other epoxy. And I do love the no VOC thing.
Yeah.
Always welcome. And the thing to figure out is if you do use the colored product, particularly on necks. I have a lot of purfling lines on my necks and my peg heads and my volute. So it's like, okay, how do I deal with that? But we always figure it out, don't we?
Hey, Michael, I got to say thank you to you, Greenfield, because I ran into you at NAMM a couple of years ago, and we talked about side dot inlays. And
oh, ta-da!
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I guess it's not my idea, but I'm glad to be able to, help somebody else figure it out. What would you do, Michael, for using colored pour fill on the neck? If you had like purfling lines on the edge of the fingerboard, under the peg head overlay and underlays, etc.
Yeah, I think I'd probably try and do a,
Everybody say hi to Jasmine.
Hi, Jasmine.
Hi, Jasmine.
Sorry, hi.
Hi, Jasmine.
Hey, Jasmine.
She's my tint manager.
All right. Yeah, I think you either have to maybe lay down one thin coat of epoxy pour fill, uh, or a heavy coat of sealer, and run some tests and make sure that that's sealing it up. But with those 10,000 sparkling lines, I've just and it's such a soft wood. It's not maple, and I do like to do a lot of. I like to use a scraper in a lot of my prep. I find that wood kind of tears a little bit, and it's really made me kind of shy away from getting the colored pour fill anywhere close to those purfling lines.
Yeah, that's the main reason I switched to epoxy years ago.
Yeah.
We at Breedlove we pour filled everything with oil based, and all the purfling. It was plastic, so this is maybe a little bit different, but everything was scraped. We had these little what we called spade bits that kind of like came down into a point like this, and Joey, one of the kids that worked in the finish department and was just absolute monster. He'd grab a guitar by the sound hole, put his blade just on the purfling, on like the side purfling, and just go like that, spin the guitar around, and there'd just be like this steady stream of just very very precise, almost pour fill only, but just like a little bit of the plastic would come off with that thing, and you'd just be like, "Geez, Joey, how'd you?"
Yeah, when I visited the Martin factory, I saw the people who were taking a razor blade and pulling it off the pour fill off the binding, and they were very skilled at it. But I thought, boy, I don't think I'd like to do that every day for years on end.
And that's exactly what it would take to be that skilled at that job. And
Yeah.
it's another one of those things. It's a crazy business because like all of a sudden that person is like crazy valuable, like, and almost irreplaceable. Like when you think about having to train somebody up to take their place, but you're like, sorry, we're building guitars. I can't pay you anything.
Yep. All right.
Is that stuff hard enough to mess with?
Yeah. Let's see if we can.
You want me to switch cameras?
Switch cameras.
Oh, look at this.
Yeah. All right. Anybody who just tuned in, this is not a pile of poop.
I was just gonna say, is this a dog? Was there a dog involved in this?
Yeah, actually, Clyde was here with me this
Yeah,
morning.
this is Jeff at Jewett Guitars. I just missed your call.
Uh-oh.
So I'll listen to Jeff's call here.
We could get informed on customer relations.
Yeah, sure. Okay, let's see if I can.
Oh, Dan, you got your shirt.
What's that?
Dan Earlywine got his shirt.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right, let's see.
All right. So I just got a light so you can kind of see this pile of poop a little better. And I think it's been curing for about 20 minutes. And it's, I can put a dent in it, but it's pretty hard. It's not.
Yeah.
Certainly not spreadable anymore. And I suspect in probably another, 10 minutes I could sand it.
Yeah.
So
its final state, is it rock hard, or is it like wood hard, or is it like what would you say the hardness of it is?
It's a question I should know the answer to it, and
It's new
I
stuff.
haven't. I don't know yet, but I think it's probably closer to rock hard.
Okay.
And to answer the question in the chat, it says it has absolutely zero shrinkage. I believe it because again, it says no VOCs, no solvents, so I really don't think there's anything that's flashing off.
Do you think stain would penetrate it once it's gone off?
I think it actually says stainable.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'd have to check the technical data sheet again. And look, it said it looks and acts like wood.
Okay.
It says stainable and paintable.
Well, I'm in. Send me a pouch.
Yeah. All right. Well, that concludes everything that I wanted to
All right.
show you today on the pore filling demo. Last chance for questions, and then so anybody got any last question?
If not, can we all unmute and give Michael a round of applause and a big thank you for this presentation, which was amazing. Thank you, Michael. Oh, Zoom
Michael. That was great.
Zoom is noise canceling the clapping.
Michael, that's awesome.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Michael.
Thanks, everybody. It's good to
Michael,
see everyone.
you couldn't see it, but everybody was
Thanks,
clapping.
Michael. Thank you.
I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you tuning in, and just to give a shout out to the Luth group. This is just an amazing resource. Man, I wish this was around, 25 years ago when I got started. It would have saved me a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. So the information that is presented is just it's incredible resource and how far it can bump people up on the learning curve. Some of the things I showed you today, it's may not seem much, but it's taken me years to hammer out some of these techniques. So, okay. I guess
Can I
that's
ask
it.
an off subject question? Is anyone willing to